Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Good. Awesome. Thanks for being here today. I'm looking forward to talking to you about Luke and using that. I'm going to start by sharing my screen, and so hopefully that will work well. You good? See it okay? Awesome. All right, thanks. So I'm going to go through a presentation to explain how Luke works and how you can use it, and then I'm happy to answer your questions at the end if you have any. We can kind of talk through any ideas you might have or questions about using the software. So today I'm going to talk about computer-assisted content analysis with Luke, so with a particular type of software and how you can use this software to your benefit, particularly for content analysis. So here's an overview of where I'm going to go today. First, what is this thing? What is Luke? What am I talking about? And then I'll give you a step-by-step guide of how to use it. So I'll walk you through each of the steps that I use to use Luke. That hopefully will be helpful if you want to use it as well. And then I'm going to give an example of research with the C-SPAN archives that uses Luke. So to give you kind of a hypothetical idea of how you could use the archives in particular to utilize Luke and the capabilities that it has. So to start, what is Luke? So what is this thing? What is the software? So to spell it out, it's a linguistic inquiry and word count software, or Luke for short. And what this software does is it quantifies data that is in some kind of open-ended format. And you can do that with either existing dictionaries or ones that you make yourself and the variables that are within them. And I'll explain that more in quite a bit. And if you're interested, the software is available for purchase at this website. I'm not affiliated with it, but it's relatively inexpensive as softwares go, but you do have to purchase it in order to be able to use it. And it's all available at their website. So what does Luke analyze? So if you're interested in using the software, what we'll be looking at, it's text-based data. So you're going to need data that is in some kind of text-based format. And examples of this could be things like speeches that are given during a session of Congress. So something that you might collect from the C-SPAN video library. News stories. You could do news stories. Any kind of news story content, you could examine that and see what features are happening within the text of a news story. Something like open-ended participant responses. If you did interviews, if you just collected some open-ended data, Luke can help you analyze that content as well. So any kind of text-based data is the type of data that Luke's going to want to look at to analyze for you. So how does it do the analysis? It's going to count the occurrence of certain features, usually words. Most of the times you're going to be looking at words that are contained within your sample, but it's going to count. It's going to look at the number of times things have happened within your given unit of analysis. It's going to use dictionaries to do this. And so it has a standard dictionary that comes in English, and I'll explain this more in a little bit, but it will look at whatever you tell it to look at in terms of what to count. So you can use the existing dictionary. The one that comes with Luke is pretty extensive, but there's also other dictionaries available. I'm going to show you an example of the moral foundations theory a little bit later, but you can use a lot of different ones that are available from other scholars, or you can create your own. So that's an option too. So you can use Luke to count particular words that are defined through the dictionaries that you load within Luke, within the software. So how might you use it? I'm going to give you 7 steps now. So we're going to walk through 7 different steps that you can use to work through Luke to have it analyze your open-ended data. So the first thing you're going to do is to organize your data. So Luke will take particular formats of data, and what I'm going to show you is the 2 ways that I think are the easiest to use if you're looking at your open-ended data, and that's either in an Excel sheet or through a Word doc. So this is just what I would recommend doing if you're using Luke to kind of expedite the process a bit. And so the first way you might organize your data is in an Excel sheet. And what I would recommend you do is to put each different unit of analysis in a separate cell in Excel. And so that would look something like this. I know this is a lot of text. You don't have to be able to read it. But what I wanted to show you here is visually what that would look like. And so what this example is some speech data that I got from the C-SPAN video library. And within that, each one is a different speech. So my unit of analysis here is a different speech given by a different member of Congress. And I have each one of those speeches in a different cell in an Excel document. And so that's one of the easier ways that you can organize your data so that Luke can interpret it. This works best for shorter forms of data. If you have long units of analysis, the better option is going to be to use Word documents. And so you can put each individual unit of analysis in a Word document. So the example I'm showing you here were news stories that I used. And so here I put each news story in a separate Word document. And then I put them all in a folder so you can upload it in a batch. So the upload then is not super tedious, but that way you have them all something longer text base in one file. And that way you can see too which file it is and which different unit of analysis it's looking at any given time. So I would recommend either using an Excel, individual data points in an Excel file, in each different cell if you have shorter open-ended data. If you have longer open-ended data, if your unit analysis is longer, possibly an individual Word doc might work a little bit better. So once you have your data ready to go, you have it formatted, you're going to upload it into the software. And as soon as you get into the LIWC software, you're going to get prompted with this where it says import your data to get started. And so you can do that. You can see through a CSV or an Excel file. Either one of those formats will work. You can do a whole folder, which is where you might put all your Word docs if you did a larger unit of analysis Word doc format, or you can select individual files. You can do it that way as well. So you're first going to start by uploading your data. I want to next kind of introduce you to the LIWC interface to show you what LIWC looks like. So once you have your data organized and you're ready to upload it, what is the software going to look like? This is basically the top component of the software. So you'll see, obviously, it's LIWC 22. This is the 2022 version, the most recent version of the software. Over the top left, the primary menu bar that you're going to use is what's called LIWC Analysis. And if you click on LIWC Analysis, this is the top frame that you're going to get here, what I'm showing you here, where it's going to give you these different categories. So you're going to have tabs here for dataset. Dataset is your tab for whatever data you're uploading. Dictionary is going to be where you select which dictionary you want to use. And again, I'll go into this more in a second, but you might have multiple options here that you could pick from for dictionaries. Categories are going to be essentially the variables you're going to code for within your data set. So you get to select which categories you want to use when you're coding. Segmentation is another way to segment your data that you can use. I'll show you how to use it, but this part becomes irrelevant if you format the data in the way that I just talked about. And then the final section is results, which is where you see your data. So I wanted to introduce this because I'm going to work through these tabs now for the next series of steps. I'll show you how each one of these different tabs will work in relation to analyzing your data. So this is basically how the platform looks when you get into it. The next thing you're going to do is step 2 is select the data that you want to analyze. So for an Excel file, what you're going to need to do is tell it that you want to pick whatever column it is of data that you want it to analyze for you. So this is my example here where I have, again, those speeches from members of Congress pulled up here. And then you can see we also coded for their political party, so Democrat or Republican. But LIWC, I wouldn't want LIWC to code that, right? I wouldn't want them to code the political party because it's not text-based data. It's not going to, there's no usefulness in that. So instead, what I would do is I would put a checkbox next to the statement. But that's what I labeled it. I labeled those as their statements. You'd put your checkbox there, and what that's doing is telling LIWC, only look at this particular column within my Excel document. And so this is particular for an Excel file. For Word docs, you wouldn't have to do this. But you also have, you'll see these options at the top where you treat each cell as a separate text, which is what you want to do because that's how you formatted it if you follow the recommendation I gave. And then your first row is header, just as you normally would in an Excel file, right? Where I've labeled the party and I've also labeled the statement. You're just using that as a header rather than as text that's going to be analyzed. So the first thing you would do then after you upload the document is select which data you want LIWC to look at. Once you've done that, that's when you get to dictionaries. So that's when you're going to figure out what you want it to count. What language do you want to tell LIWC to count for? This is the standard internal dictionary that you're going to get with LIWC. And so this is, I've moved over a tab here from dataset where we were to the dictionary tab. And in the dictionary tab, these are the standard ones that come when you purchase the software. And the one you're probably going to use most often is the top one, which is LIWC 22 Dictionary in English. You'll see the other internal ones it comes with are just previous years, older versions. And then there's a couple of different languages, but there's more on that in a second. So this is what you standard would get with the LIWC, the dictionary that it comes with. And so most of the time you're going to pick the top one if you want to use the standard dictionary. You can also add other dictionaries that other people have created or that are in different languages. So there are a ton of different dictionaries available. So you can create your own, which I'll get to in a second, but there's also a lot already out there that you can use. They're for academic use only, which of course we would all be fine with. But you can have within this additional languages. If you're interested in looking at content in different languages, the standard LIWC software has a few, but not a lot. And then you've also got all these different user-created dictionaries. And what these often are other scholars who have put together a code book that you can input into LIWC for it to count the words that they have said are associated with particular variables. So they might have like a scale that says these particular words are associated with this concept, and they've already created a dictionary to do that for you. And so you would input their dictionary into LIWC so that you can use it to code with. And if you look around at some of the scholarship that's been done, the dictionaries that are posted and the scholarship associated with it, some of these dictionaries have already gone through reliability, validity, all of those different metrics, so you don't have to do that. In some cases, that's not true. In some cases, people just may be using this as a way to count something. But if you're using particular pieces of language to represent a scaled item, you might want to think about if it's been validated in prior research. And you can do that with some of these user-created dictionaries. That's been done for you. So you can say, hey, this other scholar created this dictionary, they validated it, now I'm just using it. So that's available too. The way you get these dictionaries is on the website. So you would have to go back to that LIWC website and you can search for them. Again, there's a bunch of them. You can search for whatever particular thing you're looking for, and then you would download them. So you download whichever dictionary you're interested in, save it to your computer, and then you would upload it into the LIWC software. So there's a two-part step here where you find what dictionary you're interested in, download it, then re-upload it. And these are basically the buttons that appear when you're looking at the LIWC website. You can only access these and download these dictionaries using a serial number. So you do have to have purchased the software in order to find these and to access them, but you wouldn't really have a use for them without the software. So that's all available on the website. So when you are thinking of doing this and using a new dictionary, maybe one that's not included with LIWC, you have dictionaries created by other LIWC users, by other scholars. You would load these dictionaries into the LIWC analysis tool. So in LIWC analysis, which again was that top button that we were looking at, the main menu, within there, if you upload them, you load these dictionaries back in, you'll see a new menu appear that says custom dictionaries. And here you can see I've loaded a couple of different Moral Foundations dictionaries down here. So you'll see up top, the internal dictionaries are the standard ones that come with LIWC, and then beneath it are those custom dictionaries that you might add in depending on which ones you download. You can also edit these dictionaries. So even if another scholar has created it and you're using their file to upload into LIWC, you can still edit them if you'd like. And so this would be actually the menu item down. So beneath LIWC analysis, there's what's called the dictionary workbench. And within that is where you can edit those dictionaries if you want. In some cases, you may not want to do this. If it's a validated scale, you may not want to touch it. But if there's particular things that you don't like about the scale or you want to add to the scale, you can do it here. And so within this, you can both see what is included within the different coding schemes that you're going to use in that dictionary, but you can also edit them. So they're both available there in the dictionary workbench. So anytime you want to edit a dictionary or even create a dictionary, it's going to be in the dictionary workbench component, which is slightly different from the LIWC analysis button that we started at. So you can also create your own dictionary. So let's say, for example, you're not interested in a scaled item or you want to create your own scaled item. I've used LIWC just to count things. Like if I wanted to count the number of times a particular word is mentioned in a news story, it will do that. You can tell it, just count this word, just count these couple of words, and they can be their own independent categories as well. You can do that. You can create your own scaled items where a concept is represented by multiple different terms. That you can do that as well. And where you do this is in that, again, dictionary workbench menu up at the top right. You'll see this category where it says load dictionary. That's where you would load the ones that you've already downloaded, the ones that other scholars created, or new dictionary. And that's where you're going to create your own. And so you can either create a blank dictionary, so you start from scratch, or you can use a template. And if you've not done this before, I'd recommend the template, in part because it gives you a feel for how to create these things and how the software works with it. But eventually you could use just a blank template and create it yourself if you wanted. So let's say you're creating your own new dictionary. You want to make your own code book for it to work from. This is roughly what you could do. So I'm in the dictionary workbench here. I'm using a template that's within LIWC, so you can kind of see how this might work. So let's say, for example, I wanted a code for emotions, and I've decided that these words under the entry category are the words that I want to code as being associated with emotions. So I've created one category that Luke would code for that is all of them. So with the X's indicated, it means that when it codes for emotions, it's going to include all of those words. But then maybe I want to separate it from there, where I say those top 3 words are associated with happiness. So I've created this new category, this new variable of happiness that includes happy, elated, fun. And then maybe I have another one that's specific to sadness, where I've got some other words associated with that. And so you can create categories with different words within that are meant to represent that particular category. Like I said, you can also just code for particular words. This is slightly more complex, what I'm showing you here, but you can create it from scratch. You can use a template. You can create your own depending on what it is you want Luke to count for. So what you would do with this, once you've finished creating your own dictionary, you would save it. It's a .dcx file, and it's going to save to your computer just in the same way you saved other dictionaries, other people's dictionaries. And then you're going to upload that back into Luke, into the analysis component. So that's basically how you would use the dictionaries and why they matter. You can create your own, use what other people have, or use the standard Luke dictionary, which has a lot of stuff in it already. So the next part you're going to do is select the variables you want to code. So within that dictionary, a lot of these dictionaries have a lot of different variables. You may not want all of them. You may not want them all to be included in your data set that you're going to get at the end. So what I'm showing you here is that category tab. So if we go back to the Luke analysis main menu, we looked at data set already, we looked at dictionary, now we're at categories, that third tab over. What I'm showing you here is the different categories that are within Luke's standard dictionary. So the one that comes with the software. And you can see there's a lot. I just screenshotted the top bit. There's a ton of different codes that come already pre-programmed into Luke. And there's a chance you're not going to want them all. And so what you would do is just deselect the ones that you don't want. They're going to come all selected when you tab over to the categories tab, but you can unselect them. Otherwise, it's going to give you output for all of these different things, all of these different codes. And there may be certain ones that you want, like affect, for example. If that's down at the bottom middle, they can do tone, positive, negative. One of the things that I tend to always keep with it is a word count. So at the top left there under summary definitions, Luke will automatically give you a word count of whatever your unit of analysis is. I always keep that one because I think it's helpful to have the word count in case you want to control for it in your analysis, knowing roughly how many words per unit of analysis. If that had an impact on your data, it'll do it for you. It'll do that word count pretty easily for you. So that's one I tend to keep regardless of what other things I want included. Within this category section 2, you would also see any other dictionaries that you've uploaded. So if the different dictionaries that you've uploaded in there have separate categories, you can select or deselect them there as well. Optional step is the segmentation tab. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because based on the way I've recommended that you divide your data, you don't need to use this step. But essentially that fourth tab over is called segmentation. And that's where Luke will segment your data for you into units of analysis. Again, you don't need to do that if you've done it based on a Word doc or an Excel file like I'm talking about. And I think those are the easiest ways to do it, which is why I'm recommending that. But I just wanted to mention that Luke can do it for you. If you wanted to segment your data for you, you can have it do it that way too. Step 5. So our 5th step in this is to run your analysis. You've got your data, you've uploaded it, you've picked your dictionary, you've selected your categories, and now you're going to run the analysis. So there's a big orange button that says Run Luke. You click the Run button, which leads us to step 6, which is your results. And so Luke will then generate the results and show you what came up. So this is that same data that I was running from the C-SPAN video archive, where text is the speeches that members of Congress gave. The segment variable there is just showing me how many segments I told it to do per unit of analysis, which is 1. You can basically ignore that, again, if you set up your files the way that I talked about. Word count is word count, WC is word count. And then I'm just showing you 3 examples here of some of the categories it coded for. And so this is out of the standard Luke dictionary. Affect, it's coding for affect. And then it has tone, positive, tone, negative. I'll tell you about what those results mean in just a second, but this is basically just to give you an idea of what that results will look like. And this is our final tab within that Luke menu initially, the results tab. This is where you're going to find that. So step 7 is then to export your data. You're going to export it out, and it exports as a CSV file, which of course you can then convert to an Excel file. If you're doing a CSV file with an Excel file that you had uploaded or a previous CSV file, you might want to tell it what to include. This wouldn't be as relevant for Word documents, But for Excel, you may have other things in that Excel document that you uploaded. And if you remember when I told you to select the column that had the text-based data, you can tell Luke to either output the entire Excel file you put in there and add the Luke results to it, or you can tell it, just give me the Luke results. I don't need all that other stuff that I had in the Excel file, and you can copy and paste in or put it in however you would like. So that's what that's asking you at the bottom. So column saving options, save all columns, would be all of the stuff you had uploaded from the original Excel file. And then current tabs, tab would be if you had multiple dictionaries that you were looking at, you would generate multiple tabs, and you can tell it if you want it to output all of the tabs, one of the tabs, or which of the different outputs you want to come out in your CSV file. So then you save results. Once you've done that, then we start talking about output, okay? So those are the basic 7 steps of how to input your data into Luke, and then how to use your dictionary and then get that data back out, right? So it's counted things for you at this point. And now, of course, the question is, what do we do with that? What does it look like? So what Luke gives you is that its output for most of the variables is a percentage. So for example, if the value that it gave you was 5.98, then what it's telling you is 5.98% of that unit of analysis contained that variable. So let me give you an example here. So again, this is my same data set. You can see my, let's take this top row, for example, got the party coded. The statement was just, that's what I called it. The text was their speeches. I've got that segment variable again, which you can usually just delete. Word count, affect. And if we look at the affect component, so this is the same data that I was showing you within Luke results, now in a CSV Excel file, that affect being 5.98%. What that is saying is for that unit of analysis, for that speech, that one that I have circled there, about 5.98% of that speech contained affect. So then if we break it down, if you go to the right, about 5.18% of that affect was positive, and about 0.8% of that affect was negative. So again, just to reiterate, it's giving you a percentage of that unit of analysis that contained whatever variable it is you coded for. So now I want to walk you through an example. So I'm going to show you kind of a research question and how I would do this, how I would use Luke for coding for data, and I'm going to use the C-SPAN video library as an example here. So I'll give you a kind of an in practice how you might utilize this and why the software might be helpful for a question maybe that you have, a research question. So let's say, for example, you have a research question of how did members of Congress use moral language to discuss abortion surrounding the Dobbs v. Jackson decision? So here you're interested in looking at, how were they talking about this when this decision was being made in the Supreme Court? How were members of Congress talking about it? Thinking about, was it potentially moral language being used to describe it? And here we might think of a moral or a theoretical framework of moral foundations theory. That's the one I'm going to use here to think about how we might discuss and think about moral language in members of Congress's speeches. So what we would start with then is data collection, right? You'd be looking for data. So you could search for the C-SPAN video library for mentions of probably abortion, Dobbs, Roe, pro-choice, pro-life. You could probably throw in some other keywords there, but that would probably give you the basic components you need to look at how this was being discussed at this particular time point. Time frame would include probably 3 months before and after the Dobbs decision. So we're looking at March to September of 2022. And for example, you could include all videos in US Senate and the US House of Representatives series classification. So within the C-SPAN video library, you can tell it what particular classifications that you want to include. And since we're only interested in members of Congress's speeches, we might select the US Senate, US House of Representatives classifications. So this search, when I ran it, produced 19 unique videos. Of those, 4 were from the House and 25 were from the Senate. And I'll just preview this now to say that like the House videos were very long. So the quantity of video here doesn't necessarily mean that there were fewer speeches. It just means that the video segment itself was longer or shorter usually. So then we go into, that leads us into the unit of analysis, which is looking at each unique speech given by a single member of Congress. So I'm not looking at each video, I'm looking at each unique speech given by a member of Congress. So you would go into those videos and then categorize each unit of analysis being the individual speech given by each member of Congress through that video. So what we ended up with with that coding is 215 speeches of those videos from members of Congress. There were 129 from the House and 86 from the Senate. So there we have our different 215 units of analysis that we would use to load into LIWC. We also coded for this project the party of the member of Congress. So you saw that in some of the examples I gave you. So just coding, was the person speaking a Republican or Democrat? So then you would input that data into LIWC. So we've got now all of these 215 different speeches given from members of Congress surrounding the Dobbs decision that have to do with abortion. And so I used, in this case, what's called the Extended Moral Foundations Dictionary, which is one of the dictionaries that other scholars have created and validated. And so I was able to download that from the LIWC website and then upload it into the LIWC software to code each unit analysis for those 5 different moral foundations. So here I'm showing the results tab from this. So you see those different speeches listed under the text column, the one segment, because that's how I formatted the Excel file. And then you'll see, you can only see 4 of the 5 moral foundations here, but it's showing you that data. So for each different speech, it's showing you what percentage of that speech, of that unit of analysis, included that particular moral foundations. So then I wanted to look at descriptives of this, right? So we look at how these variables were dispersed in our entire data set. So I took the results out of LIWC, put them in an Excel file, and then I uploaded that into SPSS so that I could then do some statistical analyses on it. And so here we have results out of SPSS where we're looking at basic descriptives, mean and standard deviation for each of those 5 moral foundations. So those 5 moral foundations are care, fairness, loyalty, authority, and sanctity. And here I'm just looking at the mean levels across the entire sample. So just looking at descriptives here. So what it's telling me here is that for each unit of analysis across the entire sample, about 3.87% used care, about 3.76% used fairness, 3.47% used loyalty, et cetera. So of those different units of analysis, that was the percentage of that included care, fairness, loyalty, authority, sanctity. So then we might want to do some analysis on this, right? So we have these basic descriptive statistics looking at how frequently these different moral foundations were occurring in these speeches. And so what I ran here was a MANOVA. And so I have the political party of the speaker. So that's my independent variable, whether Republican or Democrat. And then my DVs were the 5 moral foundations, the percent values of those, which of course I collected through LIWC, and did that for initial analysis in LIWC. So again, our IV being political party, Republican, Democrat, predicting those 5 DVs, which are the 5 different moral foundations, uses of that language within the different speeches. The omnibus test for this model was statistically significant. So if I'm thinking about writing up these results, I'd start with that. And I would say, for the MANOVA, this is the statistical significance of it. And then you would dive into that, right? You would look at the between subject effects from there, where we're looking at party being the independent variable, and then these 5 different moral foundation scores being the dependent variable. And what we can see here is that one of them was statistically significant. So fairness in particular. So what I would do with this then is write up this analysis as something like this. In their speeches about abortion, Republicans and Democrats discuss fairness in significantly different amounts. There you have the statistical stuff. And then using the estimated marginal means, Democrats discuss fairness significantly more than Republicans. And so we could say there that the moral discussions surrounding abortion were significantly different based on fairness among Democrats and Republicans. So that's one way that we could think about using LIWC to help us analyze text-based data that we could take out of the C-SPAN video library. So in sum, to wrap this up, LIWC is a tool that really you're using for content analysis. It's a way for you to use a computer to assist you with, in some cases, big data sets, in some cases, data sets that you don't need more subjective coding. You can do just a literal word count of things to figure out how variables are operating within your data set. It's also a really good tool for looking at that text-based data that's available in the C-SPAN archives. And if you're interested for more information on the software itself, I'd recommend the website. And thank you very much for listening. I'm happy to answer your questions now. Yeah, oh, thanks. Any questions I can answer?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
More so back toward the beginning when you talked about the lengths separating between an Excel file and the Word. you have a general ballpark of like more than 1,000 words, or like a certain marker that's like where you would recommend the Word doc versus the Excel file?
Honestly, it's when you start to get annoyed with Excel for your text boxes being massive. That's usually I mean, for me, it's like 300 words. If it's much more than 300 words, I get annoyed with Excel because it just gets clunky to work with a cell being that big, I think. So really, I tend to do it anything quite more than 300 words. But that's just a rule of thumb. It's not
Gotcha.
you could put as many words in Excel as you want. It might just
Yeah.
get clunky to work with.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you for that. I have kind of two questions. The first is about the C-SPAN video library. When you said that you were searching for videos and then, you had significantly more speeches in the videos, were you pulling those manually from like the full video, like the individual speeches?
No, I downloaded the closed captioning data
Okay.
from each of the different sessions that they had. So it will have that usually linked underneath the video. It'll say link to closed captioning data. And so I downloaded those files for each of the different videos, the closed captioning data. I will say the closed captioning data is far from perfect. It will have typos, it'll have issues, but I'm okay with having a little bit of random noise in there, but it's not going to be perfect. So I didn't go through and correct them all. But you could go through and correct the captioning. I let it be and just assume there's a little bit of noise in the data.
And then my second question, when you get the results from Luke after you run it, do they highlight the text at all? Probably not, right? Highlight the text where they found the indicators of the words you're looking for. So like you couldn't go and see which part of a speech, like what exactly was being talked about that was being highlighted as affective language or positive language. Does it do that or no?
No, it doesn't. You'd probably just have to like control F it. And
Okay.
so if you looked at the dictionary, it would say, for positive affect, it includes these different words. And so you could pull up whatever speech it was that you were looking at and then just do a control F, like a find on your keyboard. And I would look for the words, but no, it won't highlight it for you.
All right. Thank you so much.
Mhm. Any other questions? All right, awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for being here, and feel free to contact me if you have questions about the presentation or about how to use Luke. I'm happy to answer, or how to use the archive. And so thank you for being here and for listening today.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Have a good
everybody.
weekend.